Welcome to Talking Democracy. I'm your host, Chapman Rackaway. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Kansas Treasurer Ron Estes. Mr. Estes has served our Treasury since 2011 and currently supervises the $6 billion operating budget of the state of Kansas. Before serving for the state, Mr. Estes served as Sedgwick County Treasurer since 2004 and has also been the Vice Chairman of the Kansas Republican Party. Today, we'll ask the big question, does money in Kansas really make the world go round? That's today on Talking Democracy. Welcome to Talking Democracy. Chapman Rackaway here with State Treasurer Ron Estes. Thank you so much for coming out from Topeka and joining us here on Talking Democracy. It's a real pleasure.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
It's always a great opportunity when we get folks serving the state at such a high capacity. I think that one of the things people don't really know too much about are these state constitutional officers. They know quite a bit about what the governor does. They might know a little bit about the Secretary of State, but then we've got lieutenant governors, the attorney general, the insurance commissioner, and the state treasurer. And at that point, people are kind of saying, what exactly do you do? Tell me a little bit about the day-to-day job of what a state treasurer does, just for those that aren't too familiar with what you do.
Well, sure. We have lots of odds and ends that we do in my office. I kind of call them odds and ends. Most of them deal with money and finances. Of course, on the basis, I'm kind of the banker for the state, if you think of it like that. The Department of Revenue does the tax collection on sales tax and income tax, and then make sure that any money collected comes to us, and then we make sure it gets in the bank and is available for folks. Well, a couple other things we do unclaimed property. We have over $268 million that belongs to Kansans, and we're trying to get that money back to them. So we're trying to go through that process. I'm also the administrator for the Learning Quest program, which is a 529 college savings program. So we're trying to encourage parents and grandparents and folks to save for their own higher education, whether it's a four-year college or whether it's a community college or a technical school. And one of the other things that we do, which is kind of unique that a lot of other states don't do, is we are the bond registration agent for the state as well as the local governments, but we also do paying the proceeds. So if a school district or a city or a county wants to issue bonds and then actually hire us to do the payments for the twice a year payments to the bondholders, we will do that for them. They could choose one of these financial firms to do that, but we like to think that we provide as good or better service at the same or lower prices.
So the state has all of this money, property, and so on, and you're kind of the chief money manager for the state then. You don't necessarily make the decisions about the money coming in or how the money goes out. You're just making sure that there's enough money coming in to go out as it's been allocated. Is that kind of fair to say?
That's right. The phrase I use in talking to the legislature or the governor is, I can't vote on what the tax rate's going to be and I can't vote on what the spending on the budget's going to be, but let's make sure there's enough money in the bank because I don't want any checks to bounce.
Absolutely, because that does fall down to your responsibility.
My name's on those checks, so I don't want any to bounce.
So it sounds like there, with so much budgeting, accounting, that probably someone with a CPA or a legal background is probably well suited to be treasurer. Is that kind of the background you come from?
Well, I kind of have a little eclectic background. I have a civil engineering undergraduate degree from college and a master's in business administration. And then most of my career has been in the private sector. That I did a lot of work working with computer systems, putting in financial systems, putting in inventory control systems, and also looking at how do we improve processes? How do we make sure that we have good customer service, that we can cut costs, make things more efficient? And so I did that with a variety of different industries, a variety of different roles, and then I kind of took that same customer service concept and brought it into first the Sedgwick County Treasurer's Office and then at State Treasurer as well.
And it's interesting that you point out Wichita, because you're one of the first statewide office holders from Wichita in quite some time. We've got to take a quick break, but let's talk a little bit about your background, Sedgwick County, when we return here on Talking Democracy.
In the Media Studies Department at Fort Hays State University, opportunities are there for the taking. Media Studies students are taught the abilities and skills needed to succeed in collegiate and professional life. Within the department, students are able to learn, develop, and perfect their skills by producing award-winning shows and broadcasting live on radio. With a hands-on experience available, the Media Studies department offers students the experience for their future today.
Euthanization has decreased 22% since the 1970s. However, approximately 6 to 8 million dogs and cats are put in animal shelters each year, with 3 to 4 million of those being euthanized. Today's average animal shelter contains over 25% of dogs that are purebreds. Most pets come to find themselves in shelters for a variety of reasons: family tragedies, unlucky circumstances, or irresponsible owners. It is only with help from people like you that we can help prevent the overpopulation problem. Adopt a pet from your local humane society. Even if you can't adopt a pet, contact your local animal shelter and find a way to get involved. Volunteers are always needed. Please be a responsible pet owner. Save a life. Add some joy to your own world.
We're back on Talking Democracy with State Treasurer Ron Estes. Before the break, you were telling us a little bit about your background. For a statewide elected official who don't have the typical political background, a lot of time in private industry. So you're in the Wichita area and you were in private business. What inspired you to get involved and run for Sedgwick County Treasurer?
Well, I've always been active in politics, I guess, since I was younger, involved in Young Republicans and involved with the party activity, helping out at the grassroots level, helping other folks get elected, being involved with the county and the state Republican Party. And it kind of seemed to be, okay, the next step is for me to run for office myself. And so it actually worked out that I've kind of done a lot of treasury things through the roles. I was the National Assistant Treasurer for the Young Republican Federation, and so ended up had the opportunity to run for Sedgwick County Treasurer and served
Since it's kind of a rare skill set, you find that when you have that, it's kind of like people who own a truck, and so whenever anyone needs to move, they call you. It's like, okay, here's our money guy. You get roped into that whether you want to be involved or not?
That's true, kind of like that, although it seems to me that's worked out well for me because our roles are more administrative roles. They're not as much policy setting, and so you can bring a different skill set to that from the standpoint of focusing on how do we make things work. And I kind of think that bringing a business focus and a customer service focus to the role of treasurer is something important because it's a role that provides service to the citizens of Kansas, and we want to make sure that it's done well.
Most people, when they hear the government services, they don't necessarily think customer service going along with that. Do you think that that's kind of a false split in that a government can provide customer service equal to what people expect?
I think it can be. I think it can be better. Okay. I think part of what we need to keep focus on is that even though we have a day-to-day job in our role, is that we're in some cases there's laws requiring folks to come do something with us or work with our office or any of the state government offices, and that we need to focus on how do we make that more efficient, how do we provide that service that somebody may be required to interact with us on, and make it as efficiently and effective as we can.
And so that kind of separates you out. There are so many different offices that are very highly politically charged with policy. Your office doesn't have a lot of that. You're not making the decisions, as you were saying earlier, about where the money comes from, where the money goes. You're just providing that kind of throughput. So maybe that gives you a little different interaction with the public than some of the other offices?
It does. Both interaction with the public as well as with the other elected officials. My dealings with the public are, I talk about government should be efficient and effective, and we should have a limited government, but there are some services that we're going to provide, and we want to make sure that we do those as well as we can. But also being able to talk with the legislature, talk with the governor, and say, here's a good way to make this process work, to make it more efficient and more effective. And even though I can't vote for it in the legislative process, or I can't sign off on a bill like the governor can, at least I can be a champion for good ideas and help explain the process and help them through the process of saying this is something good for the state of Kansas.
Sure thing. You'd said a moment ago about making government efficient, and that's another thing that I think the general public looks at government, and efficient is certainly not a word that they'd use, but most of the time I think they're looking at Washington, D.C. Comparatively speaking, would you say that government in Kansas runs pretty efficiently, or do you think that there's some room for improvement?
I think there's always room for improvement anywhere you go. If you're not going to admit that there's possibility for improvement, then you may be missing the boat on some things that are right underneath your nose. So I think there is areas to improvement. I can tell from moving from the county level to the state level that just as you get bigger, you have a lot more issues to deal with, and those issues, when they magnify with each other, tend to just grow. So I understand a little bit better going from the county to the state how poorly the federal government can be efficient at getting things done, because it's so much bigger as well. We focused on some things in the state treasurer's office that I'm kind of proud of in our first year in office. One of the things that we were able to do is we have unclaimed property. We have $268 million that belongs to Kansans, and about a third of those records we have the Social Security number for the property owner. Maybe it came from a bank or a financial institution, and so we got the laws changed so that we can send that Social Security number over against the Department of Revenue's tax records and have them provide us back the most current address for that individual with that Social Security number. In cases we see a lot where somebody may have just moved. They may have moved from one county, they may have moved, went to school and then got a job and moved away, and so, but they're still in the state, so they still have a good address. So we're now processing almost a third of our unclaimed property records through this brand new process that was just created 2 years ago.
And in previous states where I lived, I hadn't heard too much about unclaimed property, but this has been something that's really been, I think, a point of pride in your office. You've put a lot of attention in there, and you've gotten a lot of statewide attention based on trying to get that unclaimed property back to people. Give us first a little bit of, for instance, is there a typical kind of property or item that people don't get back that you're focused on making sure people get?
You know, it's kind of strange. When I came into this, I had no envision of what kind of property that we would have, but it runs the wide gauntlet of maybe an uncashed check that got lost in the mail. Maybe it's an insurance refund. We see a lot of paychecks, particularly if you maybe you're a college student, you graduate, your last paycheck, which is 2 weeks later, goes to your apartment here, and lo and behold, you left and taken a job somewhere else. So, after 5 years, that comes to us. Sometimes it's parents that have a safe deposit box or have a life insurance policy that their children never knew about, and when they pass away, ultimately that does come to us. We get about 600 safe deposit boxes turned in to us every year.
600?
Yes,
wow.
Which is a phenomenally large number when you think about it like that.
Yeah, it was a little surprising to me to hear 600. I wouldn't think it was that many in a given year.
That's right. And you see a lot of things coming through those safe deposit boxes. I mean, things you might expect, whether it's coin collections or cash or savings bonds. But we also have some jewelry. We have unusual things like first edition comic books and baseball cards. I mean, there's a lot of unique things that come to us. We get the opportunity to try to track down the owners or their heirs, as the case may be. And so we'll hold the property for a year trying to track down the rightful owners. And then things that have a financial value that we can auction off, we will auction that off and hold the money for the property owner or for their heirs. So, for example, we use an eBay type service and actually have auctions on the internet, and so we collect that money and hold it for the owners.
And you said that the total amount of unclaimed property that you've been turning back to Kansas is in the hundreds of millions of dollars?
We have over $264 million today, and in the 3 years I've been in office, we've returned over $50 million to folks. So it's good. That's a large amount. That's a lot of money that folks have gotten back in their hands. Unfortunately, we've received more in than that
sure.
50 million. We received, we tend to return almost 20 million a year, but we receive almost 30 million a year in because it's always a never-ending battle. So one of the things that we've discovered that makes it most successful is as soon as we can get that back, find the owners. And so we try to get on that pretty quickly. And you know, by the time it gets to us, it's 5 years old in most cases. And so we want to make sure that we try to track the owners down as expeditiously as possible.
I can imagine that a lot of, since this is a college show, and we've got a lot of college students who watch the show, they probably hadn't thought too much about this, but you hear talk about paychecks and so on, they think, well, maybe I've got something that I could claim. Is there a way that they can, do they contact your office, or can they find out if they have unclaimed property that's waiting for them?
Yeah, the best thing to do is go to our website, which is kansascash.com. That's all one word, Kansas Cash spelled out. And look up their name, look up their family members' names, brothers, sisters, parents, grandparents. One of them may have money. If you happen to be married, look up under your maiden name as well. And so any money that you may have misplaced or somebody's not been able to track you down and it's been turned over to us, we'll have it there. We encourage folks to check every 2 or 3 years because we get more money every year. And if you got something a couple of years ago, then there may be some more there now.
Have you heard a lot from people when they contact you for the first time? Are they kind of surprised that this kind of system and this service even exists, or was this something that they were kind of ready for?
It really is surprising. Most folks, don't realize until we get in contact with them or they hear about us on a program like this, that's a service that the state does do, and that we help get them their money back. And so they're very appreciative. I mean, we range from dollar values up into the hundreds of thousands. The highest one we've ever did was $516,000. That was a couple of different things, life insurance plus some stocks, and so that was the highest. And then we ranged down into a few dollars, and so it's good to get the people their money back.
Has to be some of those times when people are excited to get a call from their state government.
That's right. And as an elected official, it's kind of a fun thing to do, to be able to give folks their money back. And there's so many life stories that we've run into over the course of being in office that somebody that was actually in need of a surgery, and we were able to connect that their mother had left some unclaimed property that was able to help them with that process. And so it's really heartwarming to hear some of those different stories and some of the things that folks can pick up on. And maybe it's something that they knew their family had always talked about having, this safe deposit box or this life insurance program or policy, and so we were able to help to reconnect them with their rightful belongings.
It's a pretty spectacular story. We need to take another quick break, but we'll return right after this with more with Kansas Treasurer Ron Estes. Talking Democracy with State Treasurer Ron Estes. We were talking a little bit about unclaimed property, but one of the other things that has been a real hallmark of your office has been the Kansas Quest, or Learning Quest, excuse me, 529 program. And tell us a little bit more about that. People have probably seen the commercials, but they might not know exactly what a significant policy and program this is.
Right. Well, as we all know, higher education costs keep going up. I mean, whether you're going to a community college, whether you're going to a four-year university, whether you're going to technical school to get a technical degree, all of those costs are continuing to go up. And so what the 529 program does, the Kansas Learning Quest program does, is it allows you to set aside money as savings while you're growing up, so that you'll have an advantage when you actually do enroll. And so you can earn that money tax-free. All of your earnings, as long as you're using it for higher education, will be the earnings will be tax-free. You actually get a tax deduction on your Kansas income tax on the front end. So when you make a contribution, you can get a tax deduction up to $3,000 a year. So it's a great way for parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles to contribute on a regular basis as kids are growing up. Typically it's kids to go to college when they graduate from high school. But somebody could use it for maybe a second career as an adult. Also use it as an opportunity to get some additional education for themselves and set something aside.
So you don't necessarily have to set it up specifically for this child at this point. It's just an account that you can draw from. And is it any higher education costs? Is it just tuition, or can you use it for books, fees? Like you'd mentioned, technical college, where sometimes tuition is pretty low, but your equipment fees can be significant. Can it apply to those?
Yes, you can set it up. You set it up for a designated beneficiary, but you can change that beneficiary. For example, if you an expectant mother could set it up for herself to start with, and then change it to the child when after the child was born, and start that contribution early on. You can use it for any qualified higher education expenses, which runs a very wide gauntlet of not just tuition, but textbooks, room and board while they're in universities. One of the things that's an anomaly right now is a computer is only deductible if it's required for one of your courses. So we're trying to get the federal law changed to say, computers ought to be always deductible, because you have to have it. Even if you're not required for a particular class, you're going to use it, whether you're using search on research for a college, or whether you're writing up a paper for a class. And so it's a piece of equipment that should be deductible as well.
And so this is something, the program's been in place now for at least 6 or 7 years that I can think of, probably even longer than that. Is it something that a lot of Kansans are taking advantage of?
It really is. The federal laws were set up in the late 1990s, and so Kansas set up their account 10 years ago now, or 12 years ago now, that we've got a Learning Quest program going, and we're seeing a phenomenal amount of growth. We've since I've been in office, we've seen a large increase in number of accounts. We're over 160,000 account holders now, and we're over $4 billion that are set aside for folks for their higher education. And you don't have to be a Kansas resident to sign up. In fact, a lot of our money comes from folks who live outside of Kansas but are enrolled in the Kansas plan. And one of the advantages,
they wanted to go to a Kansas university, but they're in a border state, something like that.
Or they just like the selection options, or they work with a financial advisor who works with our program. You don't have to go to a Kansas university to take part in a program.
Well, why would you want to not do something like that?
I can't imagine anybody would not want to take one of our universities, but at least you have that option. So that's one of the great things about the program, is it provides lots of flexibility and able to use it for your advantage for the higher education, which helps each individual and ultimately helps the state as well by having an educated workforce.
It was interesting you mentioned $4 billion involved in that, and that's almost the size, about 2/3 the size of probably the biggest thing that you've got to manage, which is the state general fund, right around $6 billion.
Right.
And of course, that's been the subject of great controversy as we've been changing things like the tax laws, spending, and so on. Has it been a challenge in a time of probably, since statehood, the biggest changes to how the state government's finances are managed? Has that been a challenge adapting to that over these last 2 years?
It's actually been an interesting process to be involved in and work with. The governor's got a good budget director who actually helps with setting up his recommended budget as they prepare for the legislature. And what I end up doing, talking at that, is that we track on a daily basis how much the state has in a bank account. And so each morning I get a report that shows our beginning balance at the fiscal year and how much we spent so far in the year and what we currently have on hand, and kind of track that through the year. And there were a lot of changes made 2 years ago to lower the state of Kansas income tax rates. And the approach and the direction was, how do we jumpstart the economy? Because we were growing, but we're going slowly. And so lowering income tax rates is a way to help encourage more folks to have money in their pockets so that they can spend it on things they want. Businesses can invest, maybe hire more employees, maybe buy more vehicles, go out to restaurants more. And
hopefully
see
build
growth.
plants like the M&M Mars plant that's been a lot in the news recently.
That's right, a brand new facility that just opened in the last week or so in Topeka. And so helping Kansas grow with new economic growth. So the way that process has worked is, starting last year when the rates were lowered, we saw a drop in revenue, which is what you'd expect when you lower rates. And the expectation is that over a 3 or 4 year period, we'll see more economic growth, people paying taxes, although at a lower rate, but the total will increase back up. And so we're starting to see some of that growth now. We're actually, even with our lower projections of what our tax revenue is going to be, we've been beating that. We beat it through last fiscal year that ended June 30th of last year. We're about $140 million ahead on this fiscal year. Although I want to wait and see the April numbers, because with the tax rates and last year being the first full year of the tax cuts, that I expect some folks will get larger than expected refunds. Some folks will pay a little bit more in their Kansas tax, depending on their own individual circumstances. So I'm expecting a little bit more refunds this month. So that surplus may drop a little bit by the end of this month. This month's also a month where the Consensus Revenue Estimating Group gets together and does one of their twice-a-year estimates for revenue for the next 2 years. And that's going to be the amount that the legislature gets together and plans out the budget for the second half of this 2-year budget cycle that we're in now. And so when the legislature comes back, they'll put the finishing touches on that. Luckily, we have more money so they can work with. With that extra money, I know the legislature just passed some school funding, some additional funding for local schools when going into next year's budget. So that's going to eat into that extra money that we have now. It was roughly $100 million in new money that's going to be spent on the local schools, and depends on the multipliers, that increases up into the 120s, 126 to 129, depending on the formula, the way that works out. And so we're going to watch our cash on hand as we go through the next couple of years, and next year when the legislature comes in, they've probably got another year or maybe 2, and to see whether the growth picks up more. We are seeing growth, and we need to see more over the next couple of years to help make sure we get back to where we want to be.
And you'd mentioned one of the other changes that's happened is we've gone from annual budgeting to every 2 years. Does that complicate the job that you have in managing that money, knowing that budgets are occurring in a 2-year rather than a 1-year cycle?
Actually, it really doesn't change what we do much. I wasn't necessarily one of the advocates that we do a 2-year budget, because regardless of what you do in the first year, you're going to have to make some changes the second year. Whether you have higher revenue or lower revenue, whether there's some needs change in the state budget. So there's always going to be some adjustments that second year, and we just have to expect for that and do that. One of the things I think that's going to be a big advantage with this 2-year budget is that on that second year, instead of having to focus on the baseline of each budget, we can spend a little bit extra time looking at, a more in-depth review of different programs and say, okay, we started this program 20 years ago. Is it still getting the same benefits that it did when it first started, or have times changed, or has the program kind of lost its effectiveness? Should we close some programs down and redirect that money to the schools or other spending for the state that maybe is more relevant in today's age? So I think we'll have an opportunity to do that on that second year cycle now more than we did before.
Very interesting. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Plenty of other questions that I'd love to ask you, but all that I have time to do is to thank our guest today, Kansas Treasurer Ron Estes. So thanks again for being here with me today on Talking Democracy. Hopefully we'll have you on the show again sometime soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into our show. We encourage you, our viewers, to check out Talking Democracy as well as all the other services offered by the Tiger Media Network at tmn.fhsu.edu. For Talking Democracy, I'm Chapman Rackaway. Thanks for watching.